The soft clink of a glass against another brought the entire room to an abrupt silence. But the thing that left Rachel Turner frozen was not the silence itself. It was what her own mother said next. Linda Turner stood in the center of the villa, overlooking the rolling vineyards of Napa Valley. She smiled warmly at the guests before slowly announcing that Mason's wedding would mark a fresh new beginning for the family. Then she turned toward Rachel. Her voice was so gentle that it felt cruel, and she said it would be best if Rachel did not attend the wedding. No one reacted. No one looked surprised. That was when Rachel realized this decision had not been made on impulse. It had been planned for a very long time. The warm golden lights reflected off expensive wine glasses. Soft music continued to drift through the room. Yet inside Rachel, everything seemed to be freezing over. For years, she had always been the one who stepped in whenever the family faced trouble. When the vineyard was on the verge of being seized by the bank, when unpaid bills piled higher and higher, when her mother lay awake at night worrying about the family's future, Rachel had always found a way to solve the problem quietly, without asking for recognition. Yet no one mentioned any of that. In their eyes, she was simply the older sister whose marriage had failed. Mason stood beside his fiancée. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he chose silence. That silence hurt more than any insult ever could. Rachel turned away and walked toward the hallway, needing a moment to breathe. And that was when she heard voices coming from behind a partially closed door. Aunt Karen's voice carried a note of concern. "Are you sure Rachel doesn't know?" Linda let out a long sigh. "She'll never find out. We settled this months ago." Rachel stood perfectly still. The blood in her veins seemed to turn to ice. So being excluded from the wedding had never been a sudden decision. It was a plan. A plan that had been carefully arranged long before tonight. And the reason they were so confident was simple. No one in that room knew another secret. A secret powerful enough to change everything. Rachel looked out toward the vineyards fading beneath the colors of the setting sun. The expression in her eyes slowly changed. The hurt was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Calm. Because what her family was about to face was far greater than anything any of them could possibly imagine. Rachel walked back into the reception room. No one knew about the conversation she had just overheard. No one knew that the woman who had just been pushed out by her own family was, in fact, holding the single most important piece of their upcoming wedding. Linda continued chatting with guests as though the matter had already been settled. Mason did everything he could to avoid looking at his sister. Around the room, relatives began whispering among themselves, insisting that Rachel should simply accept the family's decision and move on. Rachel stood quietly in the center of the room, calmer than anyone expected. Then she spoke. "So, who is going to tell Mason that I own the wedding venue?" The atmosphere froze instantly. A few guests laughed nervously, assuming it was nothing more than an angry remark. Linda was the first to respond. She demanded that Rachel stop causing a scene, but Rachel had already pulled out her phone. She dialed a familiar number. A few seconds later, a woman's voice came through the speaker. It was Amelia, the manager of Silver Oak Vineyard. Rachel asked a simple question. "Who currently owns the property?" Amelia did not hesitate. "Rachel Turner is the sole owner." The entire room fell silent. A wine glass slipped from a guest's hand and shattered against the floor. Mason stared at his sister as though he were looking at a complete stranger. But the real shock was still to come. As Amelia referenced the original purchase records from years earlier, she unintentionally revealed that the entire vineyard had been purchased using funds from a trust Rachel's father had left exclusively to her before his death. It was a secret Rachel had never shared with anyone. Every eye in the room immediately turned toward Linda. For the first time that evening, all the color drained from her face. Then Rachel's cousin Ethan stepped forward. His voice was hesitant at first, but once he started speaking, he could not stop. He admitted that he had once overheard Linda bragging to a friend that Rachel would never discover the truth about her inheritance. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Suspicious glances followed. Questions began appearing from every corner. People who had spent years believing one version of the family story were suddenly forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew. In only a matter of minutes, the woman they had treated like a burden became the very person who had quietly saved the family from financial ruin. And for the first time in many years, Rachel was no longer the one standing there with her head bowed in silence. 1 week after that unforgettable gathering, the Turner family was still struggling with the shockwaves Rachel had left behind. Silver Oak Vineyard was no longer available free of charge for Mason's wedding. Every privilege they had taken for granted disappeared overnight. In the end, they were forced to move the ceremony to a small event hall on the outskirts of the city. Gone were the endless vineyards glowing beneath the sunset. Gone was the elegant setting they had proudly shown off to friends, business partners, and guests. Linda called Rachel again and again. At first, the messages were filled with anger and blame. Later, they became desperate pleas for forgiveness and help. But Rachel never responded. For the first time in her life, she understood that silence could sometimes be the strongest form of self-protection. Then, on a quiet spring afternoon, Mason appeared at the entrance of the vineyard. He stood there for a long time before Rachel finally walked outside to meet him. The younger brother who had chosen silence finally found the courage to speak. His apology was not about the wedding. It was not about the venue. It was about the years he had watched his sister carry the weight of the family while everyone else looked away. It was about seeing her hurt again and again, while never once stepping forward to defend her. Rachel listened quietly. There was no anger left in her eyes. Only peace. She forgave Mason. But forgiveness did not mean returning to the life she had left behind. Months later, Silver Oak Vineyard had become one of the most sought-after event destinations in the region. Rachel built its success through her own determination, vision, and hard work. She no longer lived for approval. She no longer chased love from people who had never truly valued her. One calm evening, she sat alone watching the sun slowly disappear behind rows of vibrant green vines. For the first time in many years, she felt completely free. If you were in Rachel's position, would you forgive your family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional family stories, powerful life lessons, and inspiring journeys of resilience, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more unforgettable stories.